None of these books are particularly my favorite of all time, and they're also not the best books I've ever read. There are definitely better books than these ones. Some of these are really good, and then some of these are just, they're pretty average for the genre that they're in. That being said, for whatever reason, these are the books that they have a hold on my heart. Like little threads have gone through the valves and all that, tied little knots, and little strings come off of them to the books, and I just can't seem to cut them. They're just uncuttable. And that's just the way it is. I've read hundreds of books, and which might not be a lot to people who read like over 100 books a year or whatever, but these ones, there's 7 of them. These ones are the ones that, for whatever reason, I feel incredibly close to. If I were to be stuck on an island, I would want these purely maybe for sentimental value, or if I was buried or something, then I wouldn't mind these books being buried with me. They're my special books. So I want to talk a little bit about each of them, and I'll go in order of when I read them in life. The first is I'll Always Love You by Hans Wilhelm. It is a little story about a boy and his dog, and the dog ages faster than humans do, obviously. So he has to see his dog growing old and dying, and coming to terms with the fact that people age, or different species age at different rates, and no matter what, he always tells his dog, "I love you, I love you, I love you," in every little phase of life. And this was the first book that ever made me cry, ever. I was 7 or 8, maybe even younger, I'm not sure, it was right around there. And I must have been younger. And this is really the book that made books themselves feel like some force, like something powerful. It showed me that, more or less the concept of death, because as a kid I was fairly just innocent, doing my own things, playing with my toys, watching Pokemon and stuff like that. And then I read this book, and I suppose it never occurred to me before that you could love someone so dearly and then they would die and then you'd never have them again. And I just remember like sobbing my eyes out to this book. Like when I finished this book, I felt like the world had shattered and I had learned some new truth about the universe. It really was that moment of realizing that the world is more complex than that little child version of me thought it was. I reread it as an adult a couple years ago, and surprisingly it still is just impactful. Now this could be because I am personally attached to it. I'm quite sympathetic to this book. It's gotten a hold of me. But I think that anybody could read this book and feel for these characters, especially the the main boy and the dog. Next is Among the Hidden by Margaret Peterson Haddix. I suppose continuing the theme of books that made me cry, this was the book that made me cry in class when I was 10, 9, 10. Yeah, again, I think it's because it hit me so hard emotionally. This is the book that really maybe think, okay, novels and chapter books are something special, and they're not boring books that you just have to read for class and stuff like that. And it's about this totalitarian government where you're only allowed to have two kids, and Luke is a third child, so he has to remain hidden, but then he befriends a neighbor girl who is also a third child, and she's kind of rich, so her philosophy on life and fighting back against the government is much different than his is, because he's just a poor farm boy who's stuck in the attic. And the ending of this book is completely tragic. I won't say how. I know for a fact that if I reread these books, I wouldn't exactly think they're great or amazing. But again, that's really not the point here. I think this book just kind of hit me so hard emotionally that it kind of created a core memory. Next is Eragon by Christopher Paolini. This was the defining book that got me into reading and really being a reader. I would read little things here and there back in junior high school, Animorphs, stuff like that. And then my foster sister, she said, like, hey, I read this and it's great, I think you'll like it. And so I checked it out from the school library, and it it was so good. It was just this whole new world. It was my first dive into fantasy with, these dragons and elves and dwarves. I had never yet seen Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or anything like that. So this was my first, my breakthrough into that whole world. It's about this boy, this farm boy, who finds a dragon egg, and he becomes a dragon rider, and then, goes on to have his adventure. I reread this series multiple times in 1 year. This book, multiple times in the same year. I picked up this book when I was 12, and 12 and 13 were two just really bad years for me. So I would just read Eragon like front to back, just again and again and again, just because I'd rather have been in that world than the real world at the time. And then Eldest came out, the second book in the series, and it was the same situation. I think I read Eragon 5 times, and then I read Eldest 3 times, just like that was all I was reading at the time, just trying, like, being in that world. This is very much the story that made me like a book lover. I read the 4th book in the series years ago when it came out, and I honestly don't remember anything of it, so I should reread this entire series just to see if it still holds up and what would I think of it today. Next is Naruto. Yeah, this helped me out a lot with my drawing, surprisingly. Well, for the reading side, it affected just my love for fantasy. It really did bring in so many new elements, just this exciting new world with all of these interesting characters, and they all have these supernatural abilities. And as a teen, it was great. It was so exciting just to read about all these different characters and their fights and all that. And I used it a lot for my drawing. I would just grab my sketch pad and I would draw my favorite panels from this manga, and I was really proud of those. It was something that I would show off to my foster parents and stuff like that. But yeah, then I read the entire series later on, and it's a lot deeper than just kids with cool abilities having fights. It goes into the philosophy of the cycle of hatred and how these children who are forced to be soldiers, they're born into this world where society functions based off conflict. Like, that's how they make their money. And for multiple generations, these children soldiers have been forced to go out to other lands and have wars, and they always retaliate and go back and forth. It's very much similar to gangs, how, if you do a drive-by and you hit somebody, then they feel obligated to come back and do it to them. And all of these main characters, they have their own philosophies on how they should end the cycle of violence. Some people think that you should do something like nuclear missiles, where it's like you become such a powerful character that it becomes a deterrent. Other people think that you should just kill everybody. Other people think that they themselves should become so dangerous that everyone else unites against them. And then there's the main character, Naruto, who doesn't want to solve the cycle of violence cycle of hatred with violence. He wants to solve it with empathy, and by getting to know the people around you and sharing that burden together. And he's kind of clowned on a lot for kind of like being a therapist, like with the Talk No Jutsu whole thing. But in the end, that's what makes Naruto so great, even if it is honestly a little idealistic. Like, I'm not a cynic. Obviously, I do think that the world's problems can be solved by talking them out, but it's really just not that simple, because, Naruto himself is so powerful, so he can use violence to back up his words. But anyways, this was a favorite of mine growing up, and it really kind of changed the course of my interests going forward. This is like what got me into, one, anime, but more so just crazy fantastical stories. I just wanted anything that was exciting like this instead of more contemporary. Next is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This is a story that I read 7 years ago, and I can kind of tell by looking at the previous or the most recent books that I've read, like over these last 7 years, that this is the book that changed my interest in like literary prose and what I look for in a book. Before, it was just mindless fantasy and all that, and I can see now that since this book, this is where I started falling in love with books that deal with characters who, one, they have a lot of isolation and loneliness, which Naruto had that too. He's very isolated as well, and among the hidden. So it's a common theme throughout what I like to read for some reason. But characters who feel isolated, they don't feel like they fit in their place in society where they should, but it's also poetically written, and it's also, existential and character driven. And this is really the book that started that. It's just about this girl who makes a Faustian deal to live forever, but she's invisible, and she goes 300 years of dealing with this and going through the world being unseen and trying to leave her mark on humanity and in the world in ways through art, by planting ideas in people's heads and then moving through the centuries, just trying to leave an impact and feel seen until something happens later on in the book and she actually does get to be seen and remembered by someone. It's a very impactful book, and it really had a hold on me, and it was from this book forward that I really fell in love with beautiful prose and existentialism and similar things. Next is Circe by Madeline Miller, and this is kind of a proof of that. I don't know why this book has such a massive hold on me, but it continues the thread of existentialism and not feeling like you fit in because Circe is literally isolated on an island. And she's supposed to have these magic powers, but she doesn't. She's more human. She has to figure out all of her life problems more grounded in a more human way. So even though she's this mythical character, you feel like you can relate to her. Watching her go through all of the different struggles, it was tough, but the ending of this story is very rewarding, and it was just a great read. Madeline Miller is such a great, skilled author. She's very poetic. If you haven't read her, then I really think you should just give her a try. And last but not least is Sunburn. This was the most recent one that I can tell is going to stick around as a favorite for a long time. It's about this girl in Ireland in 1990s, and she is in a conservative town with a conservative family, and she finds out that she falls in love with another girl who's a classmate, and she has to make a decision on whether she's going to choose the girl that she loves or choose the family who doesn't agree with her idea of love, but they're her family, so they're important to her. There's this one moment where she's talking to the girl that she loves, and she's saying, I do want to be with you, but I don't want to lose my family. And the girl that she loves says, I can't remember her name, I'm sorry. Right now it's just slipping my mind. But she says, if your family wouldn't accept you for loving me, then you already lost them. You never had them in the first place. I think anybody who has a part of them that they are keeping hidden from family or from society, as long as it's not something extremely freaking weird or there are definitely limits. If you're secretly a criminal or something like that, I don't know, maybe keep that a secret. But for other things, the story is a good reminder that you should express yourself and you should chase after your true identity, because if you try to keep it in, you're going to regret it later on, and it's going to feel extremely suffocating. But most importantly, you should really just try to be yourself, because you only got one life, right? So you might as well just say fuck it and not try to care what other people think too much, because who are they at the end of the day, right? You're just gonna regret your choices if you try to hold it in. So as long as it's not something that completely disrupts society, then just be yourself. And obviously, you got to think of your safety first. Being queer back in the day could get you thrown in jail or even get you killed, so you had to be more secretive about it. So I'm not saying be completely fucking reckless, but if you have the safety of society to express yourself, then why not just go ahead and do it? It's the worst that somebody can do is just laugh at you and insult you, and it's okay, just brush it off and be whatever. If they're gonna insult you, then they're probably just insecure and taking their own insecurities out on you because you're an easy target. It's whatever, fuck that. Who cares? But yeah, these are the 7 stories that, I don't know, I can't seem to let go of these stories. They're always there. There's not a whole lot more to say other than that. These are the ones where, out of everything I've ever read, I look at them and they just they have a glow to them where I'm just kind of drawn to them. Yeah, that's basically it. If you've read any of these, please let me know. I would love to know your thoughts on the books that I cherish so much, and also if you have any recommendations for me, please let me know, because I'm always looking for more books to read.